I took what I call a reset moment. And it can happen in a split second where I took a deep breath because I needed to control my physiology because my heart felt like it was going to beat outside my chest. And I took a deep breath and it helped me just calm down a little bit, right? Lower the heart rate so that I could mentally step back and say, what's going on here? Like, how do I need to show up?
Hey, Uncommon Leaders, welcome back. This is the Uncommon Leader Podcast, and I'm your host, John Gallagher. Penny Zenker, welcome to the Uncommon Leader Podcast. It's great to have you on the show today. Looking forward to our conversation. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thank you, John, for having me.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward again to discuss your book that's come out, The Reset Mindset. We're going to have a fun conversation there. I love that, having your book ready to go. I wish I would have had that hard copy to put behind me as well. But I read, I would say 90% of it, and it was just, it was an easy read, and I think is really powerful and certainly aligned with some of the things that I know that the listeners of the Uncommon Leader Podcast are going to like. But before we get into your book, I'm going to give you the first question I always give my first-time guests, and that's to tell me a story from your childhood that still impacts who you are today as a person or as a leader.
I was trying to think of something that was not in my book, so it would be more interesting. I do tell the most impactful story to my leadership, and but I'm going to tell a different story.
Okay.
I'm going to tell a story. You know, what's interesting is I've always had a really strong work ethic. It's always been about value. How do I recognize value? How do I create value? How do I see value? And, if the first job that I can remember having, actually, it must not have been the first job because I was driving, but it was probably one of the most unique jobs. Is I was actually delivering Donnelly directories, and I was all by myself. And they just had this big truck in a parking lot, and my job was to fill up my car and drive it around, and throw the directories and come back and refill and, just do that over and over again. And, one could think that that's super boring. We can get so caught up in, wow. And people would say to me, oh, that's so boring. It's so hot. You don't have any air conditioning and all this kind of stuff. But I think it set something for me that showed me if you put your mind to it, there's always an opportunity to make money. There's always an opportunity to make something out of it. Like, okay, it was no big deal, but like I felt pride in doing it. And I even felt pride in optimizing it, right? So it was like, okay, each time I filled up my car, it was, how could I do that faster? What kind of technique could I use that would make it a little faster? And so I think that those initial, positions that I had, helped me to see how could I do that? How could I deliver more value? How could I optimize the process? And I think I became an optimizer from that, like somebody who's always looking to see how I can make things better, see how I can find more opportunity. And it just grew from there. But I think it is some of our first experiences, right? That sort of shape us. Do we sit there and do we complain about how boring this job is, and or do we make the most of it and make something out of it?
I love that. And I think about it, just as you told the story, trying to stay present in your story, but I think of the word gamification of it though. And how can I make it just a little bit better each time?
Right.
And the picture that came to my mind, especially since you used the car, was the old Garmin device or whatever it is. And now it's just on your phone, Apple Maps or Waze or whatever you use. And you put where you're going in and it gives you an estimated time of arrival. Well, that's always really just about how do I beat that time to get there and make sure I can get there faster. So helping improve it. But yes, gamifying it, put a goal in place to it, helping to improve it each time, I think is an awesome way to go at it. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, Donnelly directories, though, I got to admit that would be tough to find the motivation behind it. I know that I still end up with these little phone books in my driveway every once in a while, and I just want to throw them back at the person who drove by and put them in.
I know, that's why you gotta speed out of there, and you gotta do it really fast. You gotta throw it, whip it out, and then keep moving. Like,
there you
I
go.
actually did not stop. I was able to throw it out the other window if it was the other side. Like, you really get a technique going.
I love that. That is so funny. You get your throw going to spin so they can't get it back at you on the way through. All right, we're not here to talk about Donnelly directories or speeding through neighborhoods, but we are here to talk about your new book, The Reset Mindset: How to Get Unstuck, Focus on What Matters Most, and Reach Your Goals Faster. So the traditional question, I'll ask it anyway. Who did you write this for, and why did you write it now?
Well, I think I wrote it as much for myself to really, it was during the pandemic that I was also struggling. Many of the things that I had done that worked for me weren't working anymore, or I wasn't doing the things that worked before anymore. It's like, why? And then I was trying to pick out, what's my process? How did I get through this more gracefully maybe than some other people? What can I share and add a value to other people during this time? And so I wrote it for them, but I wrote it for myself, is to recognize, what is it that I do? How could I do it even better for myself? And just to get specific. So the book is about the reset practice and how to build a reset mindset. And it's, I realized as I looked back on my life, is that that has been the strategy that I've always used to help me to get to the next level, to help me to let go of the tug of war, the rope, so that I could move to the next level. And it's just about, the more that we reset, the more quickly we can learn, adapt, and grow. And so, and why now is because we need it now more than ever.
Hmm.
The whole concept is about dynamic reassessment and a willingness to reinvent. And we are just in an environment that, if we are not able to be more flexible and adaptable with ourselves in any area of our lives, then we're going to struggle. And, in our businesses, we're going to lose, not only not have a competitive advantage, but we're going to struggle to survive. So it's essential today.
I look, I love the why. I love the reason you talked about and writing for yourself and others. And as I read through the book, let's define reset mindset, and we're going to story it a little bit because I think your stories in your book are awesome in terms of your life experiences that have driven this thought process as well. But you did a comparison in the book between fixed mindset, growth mindset, and now you've defined this new category of reset mindset. So tell me about that, those three things, and how the
Yeah,
reset mindset relates to both of those and how it's different.
definitely. Well, I've given it some new language since I've been talking about it a lot since the book's been released. Is, I think the best way to look at it is the next generation of the growth mindset. So I mentioned on the one side that the reset mindset is about dynamic reassessment. Let's go back and look at Carol Dweck's work that she brought in 2006 about, was her book was called Mindset, the Psychology of Success. And it really dove into and brought science behind this definition of these two types of mindsets, and how when we have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, that we see tremendous trust in an organization, collaboration, all the things that lead to greater performance. And so really showing productivity figures when people are living in a growth mindset. And how she defines it is that it's about learning and growing over time. So with persistence and effort, then and having this mindset is that we're there and we have the ability and the desire to grow and to learn. The fixed mindset is a place where we feel like we don't have any control to change anything, right? So we're like, oh, well, why bother? It is the way that it is. It's sticking to what you know. So when we're in a fixed mindset, no, we really experience very little growth. And so that's why when we can shift into what we can control and understand that with effort and persistence, and focusing on what we can control, that we actually can influence and change our outcome, our circumstances, and even approach a situation in a different way. And where the reset mindset differs, and why dynamic reassessment is more important today, is because what we're talking about is real-time adaptation, right? The dynamic reassessment means that we're not waiting as long to process what we learned and turn information into insights. We're doing it as we go. And it's essential today because things change so fast. Before we know it, I mean, AI right now is on the rise, and it's going to be changing the whole workforce dramatically. So, we need to be ready and adapting already now. And many companies, I forget the percentage, but the percentage is pretty high of the companies that are already integrating AI into their business. And those companies that are doing that, they're gonna survive, and they're gonna thrive in the future if they continue to adapt. But those that don't, they're probably not going to be here.
I appreciate that. And in the introduction of that mindset, I think you just did a great job throughout the book with story. But there's a story that really framed it for you really well with a friend in an airplane. Tell the story, because I think the listeners have to hear it. Like I said, and I'll
Okay.
tell my part of it afterward.
Well, so I'll keep the short version of it. So my friend Lisa and I, we were going skydiving, and we got on to the plane last, thinking that we would go last because we were the last to get on. But the instructors pointed us to sit right there in the front, in front of the door. So, joke was on us. We thought we were going last, and we were really going first. So, so whatever excitement was there, quickly turned into that fear. Like any choice that we make, even though we might choose to do something and involve in change, when it really happens and it gets hard, that's where resistance sets in, even if we chose it. And if we didn't choose it, the resistance might be even greater. So anyway, the door opens up as we get to 10,000 feet, and my friend Lisa is right there, and her hair is flying back, and the blood drained from her face, and she was panicking, and she totally resisted, and she's struggling, and as she gets to the door, she grabs the sides of the door to try to hold on, and she was actually, we were going tandem, so she had an instructor on her back, and he's seen this before, right? So he just tossed her right out the door. And, you could hear her fear, though, all the way down, right? The resistance continued. As if, fuck,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
and I'm like watching this, like, oh my goodness. I didn't want that to be me. So I explained some of the concepts that are coming forth in the book. Is I took what I call a reset moment. And it can happen in a split second, where I took a deep breath because I needed to control my physiology, because my heart felt like it was going to beat outside my chest. And I took a deep breath, and it helped me just calm down a little bit, right? Lower the heart rate so that I could mentally step back and say, what's going on here? Like, how do I need to show up? What do I need to remember? I need to remember that this guy's done this 1,000 times before. I'm in good hands. And my whole intention for this experience was to step outside of my comfort zone and, experience something incredible like this. So, with that simple shift, right? That shift in my mindset to shift away from focusing on the fear and dying, I shifted it to know that he's got my back and that I'm good. And we can do that in
Mm.
any moment. We can shift that, because both can be true at the same time. It can be scary. And yes, people die, but I don't need to focus on that, because I'm not going, that's not a healthy place for me to focus at that moment. So, so I jumped, and Lisa was pushed. And I think that kind of that metaphor, right, is how we understand how we have control over a lot more than we think that we do. And that is really the premise of the reset mindset. The more of these reset moments that we take in our life to help ourselves to calm down, to get some perspective, right? And step away from that emotion, and then to realign around what's important, our goals, our values, and our intentions, and make sure that we're showing up and taking action that are in alignment with our goals. And that's just a fun story to sort of bring the whole aspect of mindset to the forefront, that it's there in everything we do, whether we're jumping from an airplane, we're looking to grow our business, we want to raise a family, it's there. and we have challenges, and our lives are complex, but it's up to us to build that reset mindset.
So I love to build that reset mindset, and I love the concept of the reset moment. And again, aside from the fact that as I read that story in your book, it was kind of written so well that it made my feet hurt because I have this fear of heights, and just thinking about it and being pushed out of the plane myself, and wondering if I could take that perspective to switch that mindset over and reset it. Because look, I agree, and I think it's probably one of the biggest barriers that people have to overcome. I believe it was a Mark Twain quote where he talked about, the things that we make up in our minds, especially really bad, 90% plus of those things never really happen.
Right.
Something to that effect in terms of what he said. But we are really good at thinking about the worst thing that can happen,
Yeah.
and that keeping us from taking the opportunities that we have at hand versus
Yeah.
resetting our minds that get there. So
But
aside, go ahead.
let me just add, so just so you know, that wasn't the first time that I ever took a reset moment, right? If we think that we're going to reframe and and accurately do a reset in a really high pressure moment, and we've never done it before, it's unlikely, right?
Hmm.
It's when we practice it in the smaller moments, when we don't need it as crucially, that it becomes a habit of the way that we think. And so the only reason why I was able to do that, and I was able to smile, which is another way that changed my physiology, and changed the hormones that were running through my brain, is because I had done it many times before. And so I think that's an important thing as well to know, is that we have to do it in moments before we actually need it the most.
I so appreciate that again. I love pulling quotes from others. Nick Saban would say, "You don't practice things till you get it right. You practice till you can't get it wrong." And so
Hmm.
you're talking about actually practicing those moments as well. In your book, you talk about 3 steps of the reset practice: step back, get perspective, and realign. I would imagine that you use that in your teaching and your coaching and your writing to help folks overcome what is those things, the fears that keep them from even practicing. What other things does that practice help them to overcome?
Well, I mean, if we think about it, everything. And I hate to make it like over, um, like magnify it, but it's true, because it's a simple, like, what we do for each of those items, what we do to help us to step back, to get perspective and realign, might be different depending on the situation. But the thinking system, right? This is a mental model for thinking, that when we are, I constantly use this. So if I'm right now, my book is launching in a couple of weeks. There's a couple things that blew up at the last minute, and like, I'm in a reset moment right now where I
Mm.
have to step back and step away from the emotion, because there's a lot of emotions that come up when you've invested a lot of yourself in something. So, and we can relate to that in any area of our life. Maybe it's an Olympic athlete, right? We just had the Olympics, who've invested years and years in training, and there's a last minute injury that might keep them. They have to make a
Mm.
critical decision. Do they push it and risk injuring themselves for and not performing anymore, or do, right? So we come to those moments, but we have to step back away from the emotion. That is the first thing that we need to do, from our biases, from the way we've always done things. And then we get to be more objective in how we, what's working, what's not working, what do we know, what don't we know. We take inventory in an objective way, and that in itself helps us to get perspective. But sometimes we need to look for outside perspectives. What's happening in another industry?
Mm.
For me right now, is what are some other ways that I can look at this? Because there's more ways to do things than just the one way. So,
Mhm.
what's most important, reconnect to what problem we're actually solving. If we're in a team, that we can all align around that. And that's where that last point comes. After we've looked at the different perspectives, here are my options. And, what now, seeing those options, knowing what's most important to me and what the ultimate goal is, what actions am I going to take? What is the very best solution that I can align around, or that my team can align around in this moment? So I use it when it comes to my family, right? I use it in raising my kids. I use it in interactions in my relationships with my with my husband. I use it to make business decisions. I use it to make health decisions. So, I think that it goes across the board.
Love that. It reminds me of one of the quotes you said, if you want to catch more rabbits, don't waste time perfecting the chase. I think I remember reading that in
That's
your book.
right.
You want to focus on the catching process and not on the chasing process. And in that practice, you mentioned one of the such sections is called the secret of the Rubik's Cube. Tell me about that. I love the Rubik's Cube as a kid.
Well, I use the Rubik's Cube as a metaphor for the complexities of our lives, right? Because it's a complex puzzle. But interesting enough, there's an algorithm, right, that solves the Rubik's Cube. So you can take the Rubik's Cube from anywhere that it is, and with a few simple moves done over and over again, it'll bring it to completion. It's a sequence. And so what I'm giving as that metaphor is the same is true for these three steps. It's a sequence that when repeated over and over again at various different points in our lives and even in our day, those points are those reset moments. When we engage in that practice over and over again, and we recognize those opportunities, we're making the complex simple. It simplifies things. It helps us to calm down, to get perspective, to find solutions, and to reach our goals faster. And that's what dynamic reassessment is doing that more often so that we can make better decisions faster.
Hmm. Love that. So that's the frequency that you talk about, and maybe that's where we kind of bring it all together as to how you do it. Then, what are the important steps to, in essence, building that reset mindset? We talked about the practice, but what are the other steps that are so critical, and how do you lead someone to do that?
Well, so first it is the steps. So the first thing is to be aware of those opportunities to reset. Because one of the biggest things that we do today is that we're too busy. I hear
Hmm.
from leaders, we don't have time to lead, right? We don't have time to invest in our one-on-ones. So very often
Oh,
I've heard from leaders, they're canceling them, right? I'm traveling, I can't do it, or whatever it is. And so it's to be aware of those reset moments, when we are frustrated, or we're making mistakes, or we're seeing things, deadlines not being met, right? What are the different trigger points that should say, hey, we need to take a reset moment to see that we're lost in the chase, right? That we're so focused on the task that we're missing the bigger picture and we're headed in the wrong direction, or we're not in alignment and we're all working towards a greater good, but not the same one, right? So that's the first thing, is really creating a heightened awareness as to where are the opportunities, and making more opportunities that are proactive, so that you're not waiting until something happens, that you're being proactive in fixing these more often into our processes, and certainly not um, avoiding them or not having time for them. Then we need to see what else needs to be reorganized or restructured so that we can do that. So awareness is definitely the first point. I think
I
you did.
no, go ahead, keep going.
I was going to say, I think you want to say something to that point.
No, I think again that awareness. Uh, it's half the battle, whether it's in alcoholism, whatever it is. First, admitting that you
Absolutely.
need to have that, and the leader, when they can become aware to ultimately what they're trying to create, it can be something. If you're always busy, if your calendar is always packed, double booked, and you don't get to the critical disciplines that you say are important, it'll be really good. Good intention without, discipline is going to lead to excuses, but good discipline with good intention in that space, and that intention, that awareness, will lead to excellence. And I think that's where you have to go. Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's all about being intentional, and you can't be
Hmm.
intentional if you're not aware, if
Not
you're
aware.
unconscious, if you're not
Hmm.
really present to the challenges and the signals that are coming up.
Hmm.
Um, and then you also have to have clarity on what it is that you're working towards. So that's also absolutely critical. And all the things that I'm saying are nothing new, right? They're nothing new, but they are the fundamentals, right? It's just the way that it is. If you don't have awareness, if you don't have clarity as to what you're working towards, then, then you're not going to be able to create alignment. You're not going to be able to communicate that effectively and so forth. So it's knowing the goal, and each of these stages, right, is being able to use these 3 steps to get that awareness, to get the clarity of the goal, and make sure that you're all solving the same problem, or that you're clear on what your ultimate goal is. And maybe a good example here would be when I was working in a market research company. I came in new and out of the industry, so I was to the advantage that my curiosity was accepted, all the questions that I was asking around that. And they gave me an assignment for my first strategic project, which was to update the technology in the consumer panel that we were working on. So, and a consumer panel just means that we had many thousands of people that we would do a survey with, and that was our panel. We would collect the information that of their purchases. But the truth is, when I started to ask questions, is that we were so far behind in making updates that we were thinking that the goal was to update the technology, but the goal was to create a competitive advantage. And in analyzing it, is we were just going to bring ourselves back to being somewhat competitive. So I was like, this doesn't make sense for us, because that's not the goal. So even though I was given the goal, because I asked a bunch of different questions, it brought it to everyone's awareness that actually we're focused on the wrong goal. And so even though it might seem incredibly simple to say, know the goal, it's incredibly complex if you've got a number of people who are working towards it, and and you're not asking questions and challenging it along the way.
Absolutely. So clarity, it doesn't, if you don't have certainly goals, we want them to be measurable as well. But if they're not the correct goal, to your point, nothing like working really hard to get that done and finding out you got the ladder leaning up against the wrong wall when you get there, kind of thing. So important
Absolutely.
to understand that as well. When you think about how you've helped either leaders or organizations go through this, do you have a story that is kind of, a feel good moment for you as to how you've helped someone with that reset mindset?
There's a lot of great stories,
Yeah.
in a lot of different contexts. But
Mhm.
one that comes to my mind, is the first thing that comes to my mind, is one of my clients that I've worked with, and we're constantly looking. I'm challenging, and I'm asking those questions. And I think it was when I saw him start to use those questions and challenge his team in that way.
Mm.
So he's like, "Oh, I'm so proud of my team." He said, "We had the second best month sales wise than we've ever had." And he said, and I knew, I put my penny hat on. He's like, it's like you were on my shoulder. It's always nice to hear that they're still, that they're always in that thought process. Right.
Mhm.
And he said, so I asked them, not just how can we celebrate, but how did we get here? Like, very often we only ask questions when something didn't go well. And so
Right.
before he jumped on to the next thing and set the next goal and everything, he said, let's review what went well so that we can really be clear and make this success sustainable. Right. And so that reset mindset was kicking in as he was recognizing, here's a reset moment for me to make
Mhm.
sure we're all aligned. We're all making sure that we understand what has led to this success, which questions were we asking in the sales process that
Mm.
worked. Where did we do something to service the client that we hadn't done in the past? What's the difference, right? And he said that they loved the process. They felt also recognized in that process, and that went on to be month after month of the next month that was the best ever, and the next month that was the best ever. So it was just great seeing him bring it to his team, and then seeing, as he's telling me, that his team is now asking questions and taking those reset moments.
I love that reset moment as you talk about. It might be something, a term I would use as a lessons learned type activities. What did we
Mhm.
do well and what could we have done better? But especially to your point, when we had a success, and how do we repeat or continue that success over time through that journey? So you talk about awareness, clarity, and I think that that third is just a practice to put it in motion, right? That third step is to try it out.
Yeah, yeah, so I mean, I don't have them laid out like that
Yeah.
in
Okay.
the book per se, but when I'm coaching somebody or working with them, yeah, then it's now what's the plan, right?
Yep.
What's the plan? And then the last point would be the actual action, right? So
Put
when
this
you know
put the
the
steps
goal,
in place.
what are your next steps? But as I said, it's got to be in that dynamic reassessment. Just because you have a plan, it's a working plan, right? I mean, I
Right.
came from application development. I had my own technology company. And so, it's all well and good to have a plan, but very often your development doesn't work, the code doesn't work like it says that it always should. So you have to constantly be looking at, okay, where do I have to um, uh, work around something to make it work? And so you're constantly adapting and having these small, right, you've heard of agile development,
Yeah.
right? These
Scrum and Agile. Yeah. Yep.
small sprints. So making these each development chunk and checking to see that it works, and then going on to the next.
Getting back
Because
together. What do we learn? Try the next steps and go away,
exactly,
go try it out again. Absolutely. That's
but
Scrum.
those really long technology projects, they tend to fail because by the time you get to where you're going, the technology's already changed,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely.
So
Oh
so it's
gosh.
got to be through rapid prototyping and rapid development, and the same is true now in the whole of our business.
Well, to your point, especially with the onslaught of AI and changing the way we do things, we better be thinking and repeating that cycle over and over again to stay ahead and to be, to your point, create that competitive advantage. The only way we're going to do that is to improve with our against our competition at a rate faster than they do. They're trying to improve as well, whoever that is. So,
John, I don't know
eh,
if you've seen this statistic, but there was a statistics by McKinsey, which I was surprised at, that 75% of digital transformations fail.
I did not see
And
that.
there's a number of different statistics that I've seen about also general change management efforts. And it really comes down to mindset, because people resist change. So we have to change, or
Right.
transform the way that we approach change, so that, like you said, it's more gamified, it's more dynamic in the way that we interact with it, knowing that it's going to change. Change is constant. And
Absolutely.
that's
I
that's
I
our
had a
biggest
I had a
challenge.
conversation with a client just last week, and I said, if things are going to remain the same, they're talking about the success they had. I said, things are going to have to change because
Mm.
you're not going to be operating the same way in a year as you are today and expect to get the same results. It's just not going to happen. Penny, I think the book's going to be a hit. I'm looking forward to getting my hard copy as well. I've just gone through the digital copy via PDF. When you think about that book, it's going to come. Folks are going to read it, and I think it is going to be a hit. They're going to set it on a bookshelf just like that's behind me today, and they're going to be sifting through their books a year from now, and they're going to see your book. What do you want them to think when they see the Reset Mindset sitting on their shelf?
Hmm. Well, a couple things come to mind. The first thing I'd like them to think is make more reset moments, that
Hmm.
that it's sticky, that they have a language that makes it more accessible, and that they say that made a difference in my life. That simple little thing, it stuck, and now I'm doing it, and it's part of who I am. And maybe they say, because I think this is a sign of a great book, and then I would know that it was a great book. They'd say it's time to read it again.
Oh yeah, very cool. I love that. But those you have a few of those books that are on your shelf that you say you got to read it again. And I appreciate what you're saying about those moments. I think we've got to be, as I read through these and listen to what you're saying, we've got to be intentional creating those moments, whether it's in our personal lives or
Absolutely.
whether it's in our workplace, whatever that means, to develop ourselves and develop our teams, create the systems and processes that we need to make the impact that we want to have. It's very important to be intentional at creating those moments. So, Penny, I think, like I said, I think it's going to be a hit. I think it's going to be a bestseller. I know we're interviewing this just before the book comes out, but we'll know pretty quickly after it's released how successful it's going to be. I want to ask, how do you want folks to get the book or to be in touch with you as well?
Yeah, for sure. Well, they can go to the resetmindset.net. And there they can get a little bit more information. They can see some really great things have been said by Mel Robbins and
Mm,
Stephen Covey and Marshall Goldsmith. So I'm blessed to have some great endorsements there. And they can order the book. There's a number of great bonuses that I'm offering. So if they get the book, or when they get the book, they can put the product purchase number in there, and then they'll get access to my learning center, which has a number of great bonuses, including I'm giving away the audio and the PDF version together with the purchase of the hardcover book. So there is no ebook that's available for
okay,
another month or so, or the Audible, but they will come for free with their purchase.
excellent. So you've read your audio already?
I'm in the process. I'm in the
Okay, I was just
process
going
of
to say,
doing
how
it.
do you like about that process? What do you think about it?
It's not an easy process, but since I wrote it and I've looked at it 1,000 times, some of it comes quickly off the tongue. While others you're like, oh man, I should have written this differently. So it's also it shows you where you could have made some changes, or where you talk about it
Mhm.
differently now,
Yeah.
since we stopped writing a number of months ago. But
I like that. Jim Quick, I read his book, Limitless, I believe is the name of it, is the revised edition of it.
Mhm.
And I mean, I just love the book. I was all through it. But the one part of the book that I didn't quite agree, and I don't worry about reading faster. I like to read, but I don't. He says to not sub vocalize in the reader's voice when you're reading, or anybody's voice, your own voice when you're reading. I just love to read a book. And so I know when I read it, I'll hear your voice as I go through, even it'll be in my head. So I appreciate that, or listening to the author's voice and then being able to read the book just has a bigger impact for me. But that's me. Maybe not Jim Quick. Maybe Jim Quick sells a lot
Well,
more
we
books.
all have different senses,
Yeah,
right? Some
right.
people are more audibly
Hmm.
oriented, some people more visually oriented. So maybe he was not,
Maybe
not an
not.
audible person.
Penny, great conversation today. I wish you the best as you go out. I'm going to give you the last word. It's a question I always ask my guests as we leave, but I'm going to give you a billboard, and you can put any message that you want to on that billboard for folks to see. What's the message you put on there, and why do you put that on there?
So I'm going to go back to what I said earlier: make more reset
Mm,
moments.
love that.
It's
What was
quick,
that?
it's simple, it's what is going to help us to be more successful in our lives, to reach greater fulfillment, have deeper relationships, just be more intentional, and be checking in more often with ourselves and with others.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Penny. I enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Best wishes on the launch. Okay.
Thank you so much.